This is an appealing job. It's going to happen sooner or later. They're going to make a hire. I just don't think that because we're not hearing anything that they're not interviewing anyone. If the case was that they can't get anyone to agree to an interview or no one's interested, the insiders would know that.
Right. Yeah.
Because you would have somebody saying, oh yeah, they called me and I am not interested. That is a sinking ship. I want no part of it. The leadership's bad, whatever it might be. We would know that by now. I am very certain that is not the case.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of outside noise that has, I think, influenced other people's perception of the organization. I think there's a lot of people, especially outside of Chicago, people with a national voice.
Ty Davidson agenda, which is a decent proportion of online Hawks fans.
Sure, that as well.
His Godfather chimes in, maybe Davidson is sleeping.
But that, you hear from, let's say, it's Craig Button.
Yeah.
Right? Remember when he was just like, was speaking about Bedard, I wouldn't sign an extension in Chicago until they prove to me that they want to win. That's an outside perspective, and I think that is, and no disrespect to Craig Button and his work, he does a lot of deep diving and everything, and I say that he is pretty knowledgeable. But I think that you can't be so knowledgeable about the inner workings of 32 organizations. So when you get to that point, sometimes it is, well, this team's been pretty bad. They were supposed to be better this year. I don't know. If I was Bedard, I'd be frustrated. And that could be as deep as it went. So then you go out there and people say, they tag us and say, Craig Button said he wouldn't give Bedard an extension and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, okay, I understand that, but that's...
Craig Button is he's also an entertainer.
That portion of the job as well.
I don't think of him as capital I insider like LeBrun or Friedman or Dreger or McKenzie.
I'm just saying
those guys are.
Yeah, I'm just saying as an example.
Yeah, I don't want to take away Craig Button's journalism chops because I do think he knows what he's doing. But when I think of those guys as the real newsmakers, where I think of Button is more of an opinionist.
What I'm saying is, someone at that level makes that statement, and then it goes out to the world, and then it could influence how because people put credence into what people like him say, it seeps in, and it's maybe Chicago is really bad, and maybe they, So I would like to think that the people who are dug in on this team and the people who are doing their due diligence when looking at Chicago as a coaching destination, a free agent destination, they're doing it more than, like you said, just kind of taking that surface flyover of the organization where they're currently at, and looking at it, down the road. And that's the thing is, it's like with coaches and players, some of them, like we were talking about Mike Sullivan for a very long time being the guy that we would really want as the head coach. Their aspirations don't line up with what the Blackhawks are doing. The Blackhawks are on more of the long-term plan. Mm-hmm. Short-term gains, of course, are important, but it's more of a long-term plan. And some players and some coaches are not looking into important games are on the horizon. They want important games now. That's why he's going to the Rangers. That's why some free agents this year will be great options for the Blackhawks, would be great fits with this team, but might look at it and be like, well, I'm 29. I'm 30. I don't have 2 seasons to waste of time to not be in the postseason. So players will look at that. So it comes down to how the interest is gauged in not only what the Blackhawks are doing, but what the coach also wants to do. And as Kyle Davidson has said, he wants to have players and he wants to have a coach here because they want to be here, not because they're shrugging their shoulders and say, well, a job is a job. Like, you want to have someone that is excited about being.
I also don't want a coach that just looks at the standings and decides if a place is. That means they're not doing their research.
Yeah,
that means they're not.
That's a dumb coach.
Yeah.
To the fact that we don't know so many specifics is not a red flag. It's just that the other thing too that I sometimes think about when you have organizations that you hear a lot about from the insiders.
Yeah.
Usually it's organizations that are not running properly. We know Vancouver's business a lot.
Too much.
And sometimes I feel like when leaks get out, it's not necessarily that, a source is used because, you know, they're able to give out the information, have a good relationship, stuff like that. There are times and situations where people within organizations will leak things out to get at somebody in the organization, usually to get at their boss. So I think without hearing things about the Hawks, I think is honestly a good thing, because it probably means that Davidson is maybe said like, hey, we're keeping these things under wraps, blah, blah, blah. Don't talk to anybody. And the people he's working with respect that and have a good relationship enough to be like, you know what? I like my job. I like working here. I don't want to ruin it. So people who reach out to me, who I've given information before, or, you know, that I could provide information to, I'm not gonna.